Have you ever walked into a place and felt unwelcome simply because you didn't look like everyone else? Have you ever been judged just because of the color of your skin, the way you dress, or the sound of your voice? This story isn't about a CEO. It's not about money. It's about silence and someone who chose not to stay silent anymore. From a moment of humiliation, Jessica Carter stood up and challenged an entire financial system. This is a true journey, a journey of courage, humanity, and healing. If you've ever felt small in an unjust world, watch this because this story is for you. All right then, let's begin the story. A bustling Tuesday morning. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of Liberty Financial's main branch, casting reflections on the gleaming marble floor. The rhythmic tapping of keyboards, the hum of printers, the click of high heels on tile, and the low chatter of customers blended into a familiar symphony. Everything ran like a well-oiled machine. And then Jessica Carter walked in. You would never have recognized her. No one in the branch recognized the name. No one realized that the woman patiently standing in line, silently observing her surroundings, was in fact the highest-ranking leader of the very bank they worked for, the CEO of Liberty Financial. But today she didn't come as a CEO. She wasn't there to give a speech, review performance reports, or discuss next quarter's financial strategies. She came to listen, to watch, to feel. Recently, a few internal reports had left her unsettled. Although the service evaluation charts all showed excellent, letters of concern kept arriving mostly from minority customers, the elderly, people of color, immigrants. She had heard stories about how bank staff would eye anyone who didn't look like a VIP with suspicion. She sensed something was off. And as someone who had risen from poverty, Jessica had learned never to fully trust reports. She believed in the truth she could see with her own eyes. So she decided to visit the main branch. Quietly, no announcement, no titles, no power on display. She came as just a regular customer, and that's how this story begins. Jessica stood calmly in line, wallet in hand. Her eyes scanned the way employees treated each customer ahead of her. A white man with salt and pepper hair walked in and was immediately invited to skip the line and led to a private counter. He laughed, shook hands with the staff, and chatted cheerfully. Next was an elderly Asian couple. Their English was slow, hesitant. The employee simply pointed to the number ticket machine without a word. They quietly walked over to wait. Then came a Latino man in work overalls. A flood of questions hit him. Where do you work? Is this your account? Do you have income verification? He fumbled, pulling out his wallet, producing documents, scratching his head. A simple transaction stretched over 10 minutes. Jessica pressed her lips together. Her gaze deepened. She saw it clearly. Discrimination didn't always come from words. It came from the looks and the tone. And even worse, this was the main branch of the bank she had devoted her life to building and protecting. She took a deep breath. She stepped forward. And no one in the bank suspected that the calm woman approaching the counter was carrying a storm that would change everything. She gave a slight smile to the teller, a young woman named Amy Bennett. Jessica's voice was soft, yet clear. I'd like to withdraw money from my personal account. The amount is $175,000. Amy froze. She looked Jessica up and down. A flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes. It wasn't the amount that startled her. It was the person making the request. She quickly shifted her gaze and offered a forced, polite smile. That's quite a large amount. May I see your identification, please? Jessica nodded. From her wallet, she handed over her ID Liberty Bank card and a balance confirmation letter. All documents were valid and clearly presented. Amy took them, but instead of proceeding with the transaction, she flipped through the papers repeatedly as if questioning their authenticity. Her eyes moved from Jessica's face to the ID photo, then back again, searching for some inconsistency. Silence began to spread. Some customers behind them started to notice. A few tilted their heads. Some discreetly pulled out their phones to record. No one spoke, but their eyes said enough. Jessica remained still, her hand holding the wallet, her gaze unwavering. She knew exactly what was happening. She'd seen it before in many places, but she never thought it would happen. Inside her own bank. Amy signaled to someone. A tall man approached, red tie, firm posture, his name tag read, Greg Harris, Senior Teller. He crossed his arms, his tone flat and slightly cold. "Is there a problem here?" Jessica still smiled. "No problem. I simply wish to withdraw money from my personal account." Greg glanced at the documents and frowned. "This transaction needs extra scrutiny. There have been lots of fraud cases lately, especially with customers like this." Customers like this. Jessica heard every word, but she said nothing. She just smiled as if a storm was quietly waiting to break. No title badge, no bodyguards, no assistant trailing behind, no air of superiority, no arrogant glare. She had entered the bank like anyone else, a composed middle-aged woman of color, wearing a white blouse and a navy coat, her curly hair tied neatly behind her. Low heels, minimal makeup, just enough to show confidence, not vanity. No one in that bank knew they were standing in front of a storm not of fiery outrage, but of icy silence from a woman who had grown too familiar with injustice. But this time, she would not stay silent. Jessica remained where she stood, calm, quiet, like an immovable pillar amid the growing whispers and suspicious glances around her. Greg Harris, the seasoned teller, once proud to call himself the final line of defense against risk, now looked at her as if she were a case about to be investigated. He spoke through clenched teeth, trying to keep his tone polite. "You really want to withdraw $175,000 in cash? Right now." His voice was loud enough for everyone in the waiting area to hear. The hum of conversation came to a halt. All eyes turned to Jessica, a woman of color, standing alone, requesting a large amount of money, dressed modestly without any display of status. Jessica answered softly, "That's correct. The money is mine in my personal account." Greg was briefly taken aback by the composure in her voice. But instead of proceeding, he glanced at Amy as if looking for a reason, then spoke in a deliberately slow tone. "We'll need to verify this very thoroughly, extremely thoroughly." He emphasized extremely thoroughly, as though something suspicious had been found, when in fact there was no sign of wrongdoing at all. Jessica looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Is there any issue with my account, Mr. Greg?" Greg didn't respond immediately. He turned his head, then gave a dismissive shake. "No, but this is standard procedure, especially for customers with certain characteristics." Certain customers, certain characteristics. She understood. She had heard those words her whole life. As a child stopped in stores for looking suspicious. As a student asked whether she got in on a scholarship. As a professional often mistaken for an assistant rather than the department head. And now as the CEO of an entire system. She was still hearing those same words. Inside the very institution she built. A man waiting behind her, gray-haired in a suit, whispered to the person next to him. "Who even withdraws that much cash? She's definitely hiding something." Jessica heard it, but she didn't react. She remained still, her posture and expression unchanging like a statue carved in stone. It wasn't resignation. It was a choice to remember everything, to remember every glance, every word, every heartbeat of those who looked down on her. Amy Bennett, the young teller, lowered her head toward the screen, avoiding Jessica's gaze. She knew the line had been crossed, but didn't yet have the courage to stand against it. Then a young voice rang out from behind the counter, sharp, dripping with condescension. "Oh, did you just win the lottery? Or maybe get a big lawsuit payout, I heard. People like you get hefty settlements." Everyone turned to look. It was Jason Collins, a junior teller with less than a year on the job, known for his arrogance and love of showing off as if he knew everything. Jason stepped forward, arms crossed, glaring at Jessica as if she were some exhibit in an interrogation room. "What's this withdrawal for? Sending it to someone, or laundering money?" The whispers in the lobby became a distinct murmur. A few customers, mostly white, leaned in to gossip. Others quietly raised their phones to start recording. Jessica looked at Jason. Her eyes were calm, but beneath them was a steel-like resolve. She replied, voice steady, "I'm not obligated to answer those questions. I simply want to complete my transaction." Jason smirked, half amused, half mocking. "Of course, but the bank has a duty to verify, especially when it comes to someone like you." This time he said it slowly, clearly, emphasizing every word. Someone like you. As if those 3 words were a verdict passed on her entire existence. As if darker skin alone made someone inherently suspicious. A heavy silence followed. Jessica took a deep breath. She could have shouted. She could have slammed her hand on the desk. She could have pulled out a business card, pointed at her name and said, "I'm the CEO, I sign your paychecks." But she didn't. She did one thing only she pulled out her phone. She dialed a short number. On the other end, a calm, deep voice answered. "Michael Roberts speaking." Jessica replied, "Michael, it's Jessica. I'm at the main branch. There's an issue with my transaction. I need you here now." That was all. But each word struck like thunder through the bank's atmosphere. Amy looked up, her face pale. Greg took a step back, his eyes darting nervously. Jason froze, mouth open, speechless. Sandra, the branch manager, had just stepped out of her office and stood motionless as if turned to stone. The name they'd just heard, Jessica. That voice, Jessica Carter, Chief Executive Officer of the entire Liberty financial banking system. And they, all of them, had just treated her like a criminal. The main branch of the bank froze. A strange atmosphere took over, not silence, but suffocation. A tense kind of waiting, a creeping sense that everything was about to change. But no one knew how. Jessica gently put her phone back in her pocket, not a hint of urgency. She stood there amidst panicked employees, rising murmurs from customers, and a sea of phones now filming every single second. No one was laughing anymore. No one dared to say another offensive word. The name Jessica had just been spoken, and that face, though simple, now looked terrifying to those who had mocked her just minutes ago. Sandra Miller, the branch manager, stood just a few steps away, pale as a ghost. She'd heard enough to realize that the woman being delayed at the counter was the chief executive officer of the entire bank. And it was she, Sandra, who had ordered the transaction halted, had questioned the reason for the withdrawal, and even called security. She forced a smile, straightened her blazer, and slowly walked toward Jessica. Each step felt like a boulder pressing down on her chest. "I didn't know you knew Mr. Michael Roberts," Sandra said, her voice soft and weak. "I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. We can resolve it internally." Jessica turned and looked directly into her eyes. A calm gaze, but enough to make Sandra immediately look away. "No, Ms. Miller. Jessica replied, her voice clear, but not loud. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a serious issue, and it needs to be addressed immediately. Sandra froze. She knew the wall she had hidden behind had just crumbled. 13 minutes later, the grand doors of the bank burst open. The sound of leather shoes echoed forcefully against the marble floor. Every customer and employee turned their head. Michael Roberts had arrived, tall, stern-faced. His eyes scanned the room like radar, and when he saw Jessica, he strode toward her like a storm drawn to its center. No one dared to stop him. No one dared to speak. Michael stopped before Jessica, his expression softening just briefly. Then he turned to the nearest security guard, who still didn't quite understand what was happening. "Security, release this woman," immediately Michael said. His voice was low but razor sharp like a commandment. The guard, even though he hadn't physically restrained Jessica, stood stunned and stepped back. Michael scanned the lobby again. Then his eyes locked on Sandra Miller. "Ms. Miller," he said slowly, each word pronounced. "Do you realize who you've just insulted?" Sandra opened her mouth, voice shaking. I was just following procedure, Mr. Roberts. I didn't mean to insult anyone. I just didn't know she was..." Michael cut her off instantly. Not knowing who she is doesn't give you the right to disrespect her. No one, no matter their title, deserves to be discriminated against, whether they're a CEO or homeless. The silence cracked open again, thick and absolute. Then Michael turned, pointed toward Jessica, and his voice thundered through the lobby. "The woman you just humiliated is Jessica Carter, CEO of Liberty Financial, the leader of every branch nationwide, your supreme executive." Every bank employee fell completely still. Greg Harris, the one who coldly interrogated Jessica, was now visibly shaking. He clutched the edge of the counter to stay upright. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his eyes red and glassy. Jason Collins, the man who'd spewed the most vile remarks, couldn't utter a word. His young face had gone stone-cold, eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding all contact. Amy Bennett, the cheerful teller who had quickly turned cold, had begun crying. She covered her face with both hands, trying to hide a shame she had never known before. Jessica still stood there silent. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to flaunt her power. The truth was the loudest voice in the room. Michael turned back to Sandra, his tone grave. "Ms. Miller, effective immediately, you, along with Greg Harris and Jason Collins, are suspended pending internal investigation. None of you are to leave this branch until the board reaches an official decision." Sandra opened her mouth to protest, but stopped herself. She knew nothing could be said to fix this. Michael took one step forward, facing all three directly. "You didn't just insult a customer. You insulted your highest-ranking leader, and more importantly, you betrayed the very values Liberty Financial swears to uphold: respect, equality, integrity." No one responded. No one made excuses, because at this point, words meant nothing. Jessica stepped forward, standing beside Michael. For the first time all morning, she spoke again. Not to one person, but to everyone. "I didn't come here to intimidate. I didn't come to shame anyone," she said, her voice calm, like rain after a storm. "I came to see for myself what I had only heard in letters from our customers. And today, you showed me the truth, clearer than any report ever could." She paused. Her eyes swept across the lobby, meeting the gazes of those who once looked at her with suspicion, now hiding behind shame. "I won't let this be forgotten, and I won't let it end here." Then she turned to Michael, nodded. Michael understood immediately. He turned to security. confiscate their access cards, computers, and internal credentials. As of now, they are no longer staff at this branch. In the back of the lobby, an elderly customer quietly nodded. Another, a black man, wiped away tears. A young woman who had been filming the entire time lowered her phone and whispered, "Now the world will finally see the truth." And just like that, the quiet storm named Jessica Carter had officially begun sweeping away the polished facade of politeness in the financial world. What started as a seemingly routine transaction had exposed everything that was hidden beneath. The next morning, Liberty Financial, headquarters. At exactly 9 Andrew a.m., the largest auditorium in the 36-story building was packed. All senior staff, regional managers, department heads from branches across the country. No one was absent. A brief emergency email had been sent the night before, containing only 3 lines. Full system assembly. CEO Jessica Carter will speak. Attendance mandatory. No one knew exactly what awaited them, but everyone sensed this wouldn't be a routine keynote speech. Standing on stage under soft lighting against a plain blue backdrop was Jessica dressed in a white suit. Proud, still. She looked directly into the auditorium. No notes, no teleprompter, just a woman, standing before others, finally speaking the truth that had been hidden for too long. Yesterday, she began her voice low but resonant. "I experienced something no Liberty Financial customer should ever have to go through." The hall fell silent. Only the soft hum of the air conditioning could be heard. I stood at a teller counter not as the CEO, but as an ordinary customer. I presented valid identification. I raised no voice. I made no threats. And yet I was questioned, humiliated, detained without clear justification. She paused, simply because I didn't look like the kind of customer they expected. No one breathed too loudly. Faces were tense, serious. Jessica continued, "I'm not here to complain. I'm here to speak a truth we all know. But no one's dared to face head on. Racism still exists. And worse, it exists within the very bank we're all proud to represent." She stopped and swept her gaze across the auditorium. "I've read hundreds of customer satisfaction reports, all rated very satisfied. But a woman of color dressed modestly was denied service. Not because of wrongdoing, not because of missing documents, but simply because I was different." There were teary eyes, avoided glances, and subtle silent nods, unspoken acknowledgments. Jessica took a deep breath, then continued, "That's why I declare, starting today, Liberty Financial will launch a complete cultural and ethical overhaul. We're not just changing procedures, we're changing how we see people." 3 lines appeared on the large black screen behind her, white text on black. 1. A new code of ethics, clear, strict, and zero tolerance for discrimination. 2. System-wide training programs on multicultural awareness, anti-bias, and implicit prejudice. 3. Transparent reporting mechanisms protecting both customers and employees who speak out. Jessica read each line aloud, then met the eyes of those in front of her. No one will remain silent when disrespected. No one will feel empowered to belittle another just because they come from a different place. A quiet round of applause rose from one corner of the room, then slowly spread. But Jessica raised her hand, not to stop them, but to continue speaking, her voice clear and gentle like a bell. "I know this won't be easy. We can't change everything overnight. But if Liberty Financial wants to survive, not just as a financial machine, but as an institution of fairness and dignity, then we must begin today." She lowered her gaze and closed her eyes for a brief moment. then looked up, her eyes steady, unwavering. "I will not allow any customer of ours, whether elderly, immigrant, working class, or disabled, to feel unwelcome simply because they don't fit the expected mold. I will not allow another woman of color to stand at a counter and silently ask herself, 'Is this happening because I am me?'" From the front row, Michael Roberts stood and walked to her side. He looked out at the room and added, "I witnessed what happened yesterday, and I swear I will not allow it to happen again. I will personally oversee this transformation alongside Ms. Jessica. And let me be clear, anyone who enables discrimination through words or even glances will be removed from this system." The atmosphere in the room felt renewed. A ripple of awakening began to stir from within each person. Jessica ended her speech with a short message, one that would echo forever. Change doesn't begin with rules. It begins with people. And I believe every one of us here today can be that beginning. This time, the applause did not stop. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It carried agreement, awareness, and hope. That day, Liberty Financial didn't just change a few policies. They began to change the very soul of who they were. The applause still echoed faintly in the headquarters of Liberty Financial, but somewhere else, once the very heart of power, confidence and pride, silence was settling in. 3 people, 3 roles, 3 fates. They had once believed that wearing a suit bearing a name tag and crossing their arms behind the counter was enough to earn respect. Now they stood beyond the line, where the words, glances, and actions they once dismissed as normal had become the heaviest verdicts of their lives. Sandra Miller, once head of the flagship branch of Liberty Financial, dubbed the face of the system, now faced the harshest punishment: complete isolation. Just one night after Jessica revealed her true identity and the entire incident went public, Sandra's name appeared across every financial news outlet. Social media exploded. A video capturing the moment she humiliated Jessica went viral with millions of shares and comments. Within 48 hours, she lost everything. Her LinkedIn account was flooded with hundreds of angry remarks. The professional club she had belonged to removed her from their membership list. Friends went silent. Former colleagues distanced themselves. Neighbors who once greeted her in the mornings now avoided her. The luxury home in the suburbs, once her pride, became a retreat of shame. Curtains drawn, phone on silent, TV off. Only the sound of her own sighs and the nightmare that replayed every night: Jessica's final words, "I will not let this be forgotten." She once prided herself as the most disciplined leader in the system, but she never realized that the greatest discipline was that of her own conscience. Greg Harris, the man who had sat behind the desk for 15 years, proud of knowing every procedure and protecting the financial security of the branch. Greg always believed he wasn't racist. He was just cautious, just reasonably suspicious, just following protocol. But the truth was, he had spent his career scrutinizing people of color, those who spoke broken English, those dressed modestly far more than anyone else. And this time, when the person he suspected turned out to be the CEO, the truth had nowhere left to hide. Greg lost his job. His system access was revoked. But that wasn't the worst part. His wife, a school teacher, once proud of being married to a banker, could no longer mention his name at work. Their 2 children were mocked by classmates as kids of a racist. He walked outside with his head down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Then came the job interviews, where every application was closed after one line in his file: terminated for racially discriminatory behavior toward the acting CEO. Greg, once so sure he'd retire with the bank, now sat alone by the window every morning, reading job ads in vain. No justification could erase the stain burned into public memory. Jason Collins, the youngest of the three and the one who had the most opportunity ahead of him. Jason had been a rising star in the Liberty Young Talent program, groomed to become a manager within 5 years. He loved attention, loved debates, and at times, loved belittling those who were different. In Jason's mind, Jessica that day was just a black woman withdrawing a lot of money, the perfect setup for office banter. He thought his half jokes would get laughs, but this time he misjudged both the person and the moment. The video capturing Jason's smirking face as he said, "People like you get compensated a lot, don't they?" spread across TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of outraged comments. He became a symbol of youthful arrogance, plus ignorance, plus prejudice. Friends pulled away. His job was gone. His training contract was canceled. His social media accounts were bombarded daily. Jason had to move twice in 1 month. Too many people recognized him on the street. No company would hire him, not because of his age, but because he had stood against the values the modern world now fights to protect. 3 people, 3 stories, one ending they lost everything. Not just reputation status or careers, but the most vital thing, the respect of society. Meanwhile, one woman, Jessica Carter, once detained at a teller counter like a suspect, was now becoming a living symbol of justice, humanity, and change. Not long after the reform at Liberty Financial officially launched, the name Jessica Carter had transcended the boundaries of the financial world. Her story, from being a customer, subjected to discrimination, to becoming the architect of systemic reform, spread like wildfire, touching the driest and most overlooked corner of society. Our silence in the face of injustice. Major financial newspapers ran headlines. CEO humiliated at her own bank. Wall Street Herald, Jessica Carter. Not just a leader, but a modern symbol. Against discrimination, New York Ledger. Across social media, hashtags flooded every platform. Yajung stand with Jessica, and this is why we speak up, and end banking discrimination. Jessica's story was no longer an internal banking affair. It had become a mirror reflecting who we truly are. Her first public appearance. Less than a week after the incident at the Central Branch, Jessica accepted an invitation to appear on a live televised forum titled The Voice of Justice. She walked onto the stage to a long round of applause under soft lighting, with no grandeur, just presence. The host asked, "Why didn't you get angry? Why didn't you raise your voice, slam the desk, fight back?" Jessica smiled gently and replied, "I didn't need to. I don't need to prove my strength by being loud. The truth is loud enough." That one sentence swept across the internet. Not because it was clever, but because it was real. From television to thousands of forums. Following the broadcast, Jessica received over 70 speaking invitations from universities, corporate seminars, and social organizations. Wherever she went, her message remained the same. Injustice doesn't begin with major acts. It starts with small glances, seemingly harmless questions, and silence. And then it becomes normal. At a major corporate ethics summit in Chicago, standing before 2,000 attendees, mostly CEOs and leaders, she said, "If I, a CEO, can be discriminated against just for not wearing a suit, then your employees, your customers, and even your children could be next. Don't assume it isn't happening just because you haven't seen it." No one in the audience objected. There were only nods, downcast eyes, and a few quietly wiping their glasses, masking the emotion behind them. The young woman who once stayed silent. After a speech at a small college in Georgia, a shy sophomore, a young black student in a hoodie approached her. He hesitated, then said, "Ms. Jessica, I was going to drop out of banking. I have never seen someone who looked like me in a position like yours, but today after hearing you, I think I'm going to stay." Jessica didn't say a word. She just embraced him, a hug that passed on a flame. And then, something unprecedented happened. The mayor of New York invited Jessica to speak at the Urban Human Rights Summit, an annual event rarely featuring anyone outside the political world. On the massive LED screen behind her, white letters appeared on a black background. One small act, one loud voice. Jessica stepped into the light. No notes, no lapel, mic, nothing in her hands. She looked out over the sea of people, took a deep breath, and began. "I'm not an activist. I'm not a public speaker. I'm just a woman who walked into a place where I was supposed to belong and was treated like I didn't. I'm not telling this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling it so you'll see yourselves in the eyes of someone who stayed silent for too long." The closing that made the whole room rise. I don't want people to walk into bank stores, classrooms, or offices and wonder, will I be doubted today? Just for being myself. I want everyone here, from staff managers, directors, to everyday citizens, to commit to changing that. Not through slogans, not through PR campaigns, but by one thing: refusing to stay silent whenever you witness injustice. The applause erupted, not because Jessica said anything new, but because she said what everyone knew, what everyone saw, but no one had dared to voice. That day, no one left the auditorium feeling the same as when they entered. Jessica didn't just awaken awareness. She stirred the conscience. 1 month later, at Liberty Financial headquarters, once again the grand conference hall lit up early. Not for a strategy session, not to celebrate anyone, but to announce the results of the largest internal investigation in the bank's history. 3 familiar names appeared on the giant screen: Sandra Miller, Greg Harris, Jason Collins. Thousands of eyes fixed on the stage breath held. A special committee from the Bank Ethics Council, independent HR experts, and customer representatives were all present. Jessica Carter, in a simple deep blue suit, walked calmly to the center of the room. She didn't tremble, not because she was stronger now, but because the truth stood with her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "it's been 31 days since I became both a witness and a victim of a moment that exposed the painful underbelly of the very institution I lead." Her voice wasn't loud, but every word carried weight. "In these 31 days, we have conducted 137 employee interviews, reviewed over 200 hours of surveillance footage, and analyzed 6 years of internal complaint data." The room fell into stillness. No one stirred. No phone buzzed. Jessica's gaze landed on 3 empty chairs to the left of the stage reserved for Sandra, Greg, and Jason. None of them showed up today. The investigation concludes that all 3 individuals engaged in repeated discriminatory behavior, not only toward me, but toward numerous customers over several years. They intentionally violated procedures, including demanding unnecessary documentation, delaying transactions, and denying support based on personal bias and prejudice. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Jessica raised her hand gently and continued. "They did not act out of ignorance. They acted out of a belief that they had the right to treat others that way, and that no one would ever hold them accountable." She tapped her tablet, flipping to the next page. However, I am not here today to condemn three individuals. I am here to declare that from this moment forward, Liberty Financial will no longer allow silence to be an accomplice. Three lines appeared on the screen behind her. Permanent termination of Sandra Miller, Greg Harris, and Jason Collins. Lifetime ban from applying to any Liberty-affiliated financial institution or partner. Public apology and financial restitution to affected customers. The entire room stood up, not because Jessica asked them to, but because everyone knew this was a historic moment. Michael Roberts, Executive Vice President, stepped forward to stand beside her. I once believed we were doing well. That discrimination didn't exist in our system. I was wrong, he admitted. He scanned the audience. We cannot be proud of our financial performance if our humanity is bankrupt. Jessica returned the mic. Her closing words would later be quoted across hundreds of headlines. These three individuals were not held accountable because they insulted me, but because they betrayed the very spirit of justice on which this institution was founded. And let me be clear. From now on, every person at Liberty, from intern to senior executive, must understand one thing. You are not just performing transactions. You are representing the respect every customer deserves. She paused, then delivered the final line. I am Jessica Carter, and I am proud not because I am CEO, but because I did not stay silent. After the speech, a video produced by Liberty's media team aired nationwide. No dramatic music, just truth. Footage of Jessica standing outside the branch on the morning she was detained. Footage of her being interrogated. And finally, her return standing before hundreds of employees telling the truth. At the end of the video, one simple sentence appeared. Justice doesn't begin with systems. It begins with people. Jessica Carter. From that day forward, every Liberty employee was required to complete the Jessica Standard, a 4-week mandatory training on conduct, ethics, humanity, and fairness in financial services. No longer was kindness considered optional. Kindness became an obligation. 1 week after the final verdict at Liberty, the media office at Liberty Financial received over 1,200 emails. Not from investors, not from reporters, but from people who had once stayed silent. People who had walked into a bank and walked out carrying a wound no one could see. The first letter is, Dear Ms. Jessica, my name is Rosa. I'm 64, originally from Mexico. 3 years ago, I was denied the chance to open an account at the Spring Valley branch. The reason, not good enough English. But I had brought my grandson to translate. I had every document ready. I even went back 3 times. But they didn't see me. They only saw my skin color and looked away. I stayed silent. I believed I was too small to change anything. Until I saw you on TV. You made me believe silence is no longer an option. Then came the second letter. Jessica, I'm Tommy. 17, just started college. My mom is Vietnamese. She doesn't know how to use bank cards, so I go with her when she needs to withdraw money. One time I saw them laughing when she signed her name with shaky hands or English broken. They whispered to each other, probably sending money to her husband in prison. That day my mom said nothing, but I saw her cry in the car for 20 minutes. I used to hate banks. But now I think, if you could change everything from the inside, maybe I can too. Jessica sat alone in her office on the top floor of Liberty. Reading each letter, she didn't cry, she wasn't angry. She simply sat in silence. Because at last, what she had started was calling out to those who once believed they had no right to speak. The event Listening for Change. Jessica decided to host a private gathering. No media, No cameras, no speeches. Just 30 individuals who had written to her, invited to a warm, quiet space with a circle of wooden chairs and soft amber lighting. They sat down. There was no speaker, only sharers. A middle-aged black woman named Sharon spoke first. I once applied for a loan to fix my house after a storm. They told me to reconsider that my neighborhood wasn't worth investing in. But when a white man walked in, right after they offered him coffee and handed him a detailed quote, an elderly Indian man, thin but eyes sharp, said, "They told me something in my paperwork felt off, but no one pointed out what. When I asked for the third time, they called security." A young Chinese international student clenched her hands. "I used to think I was invisible, but when I saw you, Jessica, standing in front of thousands of people, I felt like I existed." Jessica didn't speak much. She listened, she nodded, she held hands, and sometimes she wept, not out of pity, but because she had once sat where they were now. A simple gift to close the circle. As each guest left, they were handed a small leather-bound notebook. On the cover, engraved words, "You don't need a title to be heard. You just need the courage to speak." Inside blank pages, for them to write the next chapter in their own voice. Then Jessica wrote an open letter to the entire system. To those who were ever hurt by the very place that was supposed to protect you, I'm sorry. Not just as a CEO, but as someone who has also been judged for how I look, the color of my skin, the sound of my voice. I know an apology isn't enough, but I promise you this: we will change every employee, every department, every corner of every branch. And if you've ever thought I'm nothing, I can't make a difference, then I hope this story makes you think again. What began as a personal wound had become a guiding light for thousands of others. Not just because Jessica was brave, but because she created a space where others could be brave too. 2 months after the incident, Jessica Carter returned not to talk about the past, but to announce the future of Liberty Financial. On a modest stage, there were no LED screens, no colorful lights, just a whiteboard, and one word written in bold, deliberate strokes: humanity. I don't want to run an ordinary bank. That was the first thing she said. Several brows furrowed. A few front-row investors shifted in their seats. They had come expecting financial projections, growth strategies, not something as intangible as humanity. But then she continued, "I want to run a bank where people feel safe the moment they walk in. Not just financially safe, but humanly safe." The room fell silent. People began to realize she wasn't talking about profits. She was talking about values, introducing the human-centered banking model. Jessica unveiled a plan unlike anything the industry had seen. 1. Bias-free transactions. All branches will install AI-powered emotional recognition. Systems to monitor facial reactions of customers when denied services used to evaluate the quality of interaction. Staff with high rates of negative feedback will undergo retraining or reassignment. 2. On-site emotional support rooms. Each major branch will include a private room where customers can discuss stress fears or past negative banking experiences. No financial questions, just listening. 3. Respect uniforms. Employees are no longer required to wear stiff business attire, but must wear a name tag that reads, "I'm here to listen to you." This phrase isn't just a message, it's a daily reminder. Pilot launched in 5 major cities: New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, and Oakland. After just 3 weeks, customer return rate increased by 42%. 76% said they felt more respected. And unexpectedly, 30% of transactions came from customers who previously distrusted banks altogether. From then on, people stopped calling Liberty a bank. They started calling it the place where trust begins again. An elderly man named Henry 78 wrote, "For the first time, I was invited to sit down, not because I had a large deposit, but because someone wanted to hear about the time I was denied service 20 years ago. And when I cried, the staff member didn't say a word. She just handed me a tissue and sat with me for 15 minutes. No charge, no record, just humanity." A staff member named Malik shared, "I used to think I was just a tool for selling services, but now every morning I adjust my name tag that says, 'I'm here to listen to you, and I know I'm doing something bigger than money.'" Jessica didn't run a flashy marketing campaign. No influencers, no giant billboards. She let real experiences do the talking. And it worked. Former victims, former skeptics, former silent customers became unofficial ambassadors. They began telling stories of Liberty as something rare, a place where no one asks, "What's your income?" before offering you a smile. When asked about long-term goals, Jessica replied, "I'm not aiming for a number of branches, clients, or transactions. I'm aiming for this, that every person who walks in, no matter who they are, walks out feeling they deserve to live with dignity." Beyond banking schools, hospitals, law firms, even airlines began asking, "Can we implement this model too?" Jessica didn't sell a license. She simply shared a set of documents, 5 steps to becoming human-centered. No paywall, no patents, just one small note. You don't need to be a bank to be a place that restores trust. From one moment of humiliation, Jessica sparked a cultural revolution in customer care. No shouting, no revenge, just a relentless choice to be kind to the very end. A weekend evening, the top floor of Liberty Financial's headquarters glowed with warm amber light. Most of the building had gone dark early. Outside, the Chicago winter sky stretched cold but still. Jessica Carter, no longer in her usual deep blue suit, sat alone in her office. A small desk lamp cast a soft glow on the open leather notebook in front of her. No more meetings, no more interviews, no more applause. Just her and herself. She took a deep breath, then began to write. "Dear Jessica, if you're reading this, it means everything has passed. You're no longer the woman who was humiliated at the teller counter. You're no longer the CEO known across the nation. You're just a woman who's walked through a storm and is now sitting still looking at the pieces that somehow came together into something beautiful." Jessica paused. She stared out the window where the city remained awake but quiet. Old memories returned. The moment she was asked to leave the bank like a criminal, the cold voice, the suspicious eyes, that feeling of being stripped not of money, but of dignity. You wanted to stay silent. You wanted to walk away. You told yourself, "It's nothing, just a small thing." But then, you didn't stay silent. Jessica smiled faintly. And because of that one small decision, you made an entire system change. You gave thousands of people the courage to speak. You forced those who had never questioned their biases to look inward. And most importantly, you helped yourself realize kindness isn't weakness. Kindness is the purest form of strength. She set down the pen. A single tear fell onto the page. But it wasn't from bitterness. It wasn't from anger. It was a tear of gratitude. A quiet scene outside. On the street, a small Liberty branch still had its lights on. Inside, an elderly customer sat as a young employee gently walked her through opening a new account. No rushing, no dismissiveness, just listening. Nearby, a child looked around the lobby and asked his mother, "Mom, why is that lady's picture on the wall?" The mother smiled, because she's the one who helped this bank understand. That respect starts with the little things. Back on the top floor, Jessica penned the final lines. If there's one thing you must never forget, it's this. You can't change the world with a loud revolution, but you can change it by choosing not to look away when someone is hurting. And sometimes one brave voice speaking the truth is all it takes for everything to change forever. She set the pen down, closed the notebook. On her desk sat an old photo, a younger Jessica taken years ago when she first entered banking. In the photo, she was smiling, but her eyes still held caution like someone trying to prove her worth to the world. Jessica gently brushed her fingers over the photo and whispered, "You don't have to prove anything anymore. You've done enough." And you, the one listening to this story, maybe you too have been misunderstood, judged, or stayed silent out of fear. But remember this, you don't need a high title. You don't need wealth. You just need to hold on to kindness, even when the world isn't kind to you. Because that very kindness can change a system, can change the world. Just like Jessica Carter, a woman, a customer, a CEO, but above all a human being brave enough not to stay silent. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If you believe that kindness is power, don't forget to share this story. Because light always begins with one small candle lit in the dark. See you in the next video.